when a journalist mocked Barron Trump at a charity gala. No one expected his calm response to steal the show. The ballroom at the Fairmont Grand Hotel was nothing short of breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above rows of elegantly dressed attendees, their quiet hum of conversation adding to the grandeur of the annual charity gala. Among the crowd were some of the nation's most influential figures, business moguls, actors, and journalists, all gathered to support a foundation dedicated to helping underprivileged youth. The air was alive with energy, yet an undercurrent of anticipation buzzed as the evening's keynote speaker prepared to take the stage. Seated toward the back, in a less conspicuous corner, was Barron Trump. At just 18 years old, his tall frame and stoic demeanor made him stand out, though not intentionally. He had been invited by a family friend, a quiet gesture meant to introduce him to a different circle. Unlike many attendees who thrived in the spotlight, Barron seemed content to observe, his piercing blue eyes scanning the room with a calmness that belied his age. The gala had been moving along smoothly. A string quartet played softly in the background as waitstaff glided through the room serving delicate hors d'oeuvres and champagne. Conversations were warm and laughter rippled through the crowd. Yet, as the night progressed, it became clear that the highlight everyone was waiting for was the speech. The journalists, a celebrated figure in liberal media circles, had been announced weeks earlier as the evening's keynote speaker. Known for their sharp wit and unapologetic opinions, they were revered by some and criticized by others for their fiery rhetoric. Tonight, they promised to deliver an address that would challenge perspectives and ignite thought. As the MC introduced the journalist, a noticeable shift in the atmosphere occurred. Conversations quieted, glasses were set down, and all eyes turned to the stage. Barron, too, leaned back slightly in his chair, his expression unreadable. The journalist stepped up to the podium, a confident smile spreading across their face. Dressed impeccably in a sleek black suit, they exuded charisma. The audience responded with polite applause, but there was an edge of expectation. Would they push boundaries tonight, as they so often did? What no one anticipated was just how much. As the spotlight illuminated the stage, the journalist began with ease, their tone conversational and laced with charm. They joked about the city's infamous traffic and shared a lighthearted anecdote about a past gala mishap involving a toppled champagne tower. Laughter rippled through the audience, breaking some of the initial tension. For a moment, it felt like any other high-profile event, polished, predictable, and harmless. But soon, their tone shifted. What started as general commentary on politics and culture veered toward a more pointed critique. They referenced well-known political figures, poking fun at their quirks and missteps. Each jab drew chuckles and nods from parts of the crowd, but others exchanged glances, their smiles tightening. Then, the focus landed squarely on Donald Trump. We can't talk about the state of the world without mentioning the man who made orange the new black, the journalist quipped, drawing scattered laughter. Love him or hate him, you have to admit, he's the gift that keeps on giving, for people like me. The crowd's response was mixed. Some chuckled, others shifted uncomfortably. A few even glanced toward Barron, who remained composed, his expression unchanged. What happened next would be the moment that no one in the room would forget. Laughter filled the room, some genuine, others nervous. A few guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. At his table, Barron Trump remained still, his expression unreadable. If the journalist had noticed his presence, they gave no indication, at least not yet. The jokes kept coming, each one sharper than the last. The journalist moved on, poking fun at Trump's policies, his infamous tweets, even his public appearances. But as the jokes grew bolder, the laughter in the room began to thin out, replaced by a subtle but growing unease among the attendees. Still, the journalist wasn't finished. And of course, they said, pausing for effect, we can't forget his most overlooked legacy, the next generation. I mean, let's talk about Barron. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Heads turned toward Barron, who sat motionless, his face now the center of attention. The journalist's tone remained playful, but the words carried a sting. Imagine growing up in a golden tower, surrounded by marble everything, while your dad tweets about covfefe, and the rest of us are just trying to survive Monday mornings. That must have been character building. The attempt at humor fell flat. A few chuckled nervously, but most sat in stunned silence. The spotlight, unasked for and unwelcome, had landed squarely on Barron. But instead of crumbling under the weight of the moment, he remained calm, his composure unshaken. What he would do next, however, would leave the entire room reeling. The room seemed to hold its breath. All eyes were on Barron Trump, a young man suddenly thrust into the spotlight without warning. The journalist's words lingered in the air, heavy, cutting, as the crowd waited for his reaction. But Barron didn't flinch. He didn't shift in his chair or glance around nervously. Instead, he sat perfectly still, his expression calm but unreadable, his hands resting lightly on the edge of the table. The silence grew louder with each passing second. A few people exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort palpable. Even the journalists seemed to notice the tension, their confident smirk faltering ever so slightly as they glanced toward Barron's table. Perhaps they had expected a laugh, a dismissive shrug, anything but this quiet defiance. But Barron's stillness wasn't indifference, it was something else entirely. His presence, understated yet commanding, seemed to grow as the moment stretched on. The room, which had moments earlier been buzzing with conversation and laughter, was now unnervingly quiet. It was as if everyone, especially those who had chuckled at the joke, suddenly realized the weight of what had been said. His silence wasn't just an absence of words, it was a statement in itself. It said, "I hear you, I see you, and I am not moved." A murmur broke the silence as someone near the stage whispered to their companion. The journalists cleared their throat, attempting to regain control of the moment. "Tough crowd," they muttered into the microphone, forcing a laugh that no one echoed. The tension was thick, wrapping around the room like an invisible fog. And then Barron moved. Slowly, deliberately, he pushed back his chair and stood. The soft scrape of the chair legs against the floor was the only sound in the room. At just over 6 feet tall, he was an imposing figure, his height matched by an aura of unexpected maturity. He looked out at the crowd, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on the journalist. Barron didn't need to speak. His presence alone commanded attention, silencing even the faint whispers at the back of the room. Then he stepped away from his table and walked toward the stage, each step measured, his posture straight and unwavering. The journalists froze, their earlier confidence evaporating as Barron approached. The crowd watched, their eyes wide with anticipation and disbelief. No one knew what he would say or do, but one thing was certain: this young man was about to own the moment. And when Barron reached the edge of the stage and finally spoke, his words were nothing anyone could have anticipated. The tension in the air was almost tangible, every second stretching into what felt like an eternity. Barron stopped a few feet away from the podium, standing tall and composed. With a voice steady and deliberate, he spoke, his words cutting through the silence like a blade. "Thank you for your insight," he began, his tone calm but firm. The choice of words caught both the journalist and the audience off guard. There was no anger, no trace of indignation, only an eerie sense of control that seemed far beyond his years. "I've grown up watching people make assumptions about me, my family, and my life," Barron continued, his eyes locked onto the journalist. "It's almost become a game to some, a way to fill in the gaps when you don't know the full story, and I get it. We're public figures, it comes with the territory." The room remained silent, captivated by the clarity and maturity in his voice. Even those who had laughed at the earlier jokes now sat motionless, their expressions tinged with unease. "But there's something important that often gets overlooked," Barron said, his tone shifting slightly, a subtle intensity building beneath his words. Behind every headline, behind every punchline, there's a human being, someone with their own struggles, their own dreams, and their own story. You may think you know me because of who my father is, but you don't. Not really. The journalist, who had been gripping the edge of the podium, now seemed visibly uncomfortable. Barron's words weren't an attack. They were a mirror, reflecting back the weight of what had just occurred. What I've learned, Barron continued, pausing for a moment, is that respect doesn't have to be earned. It should be given freely, especially when you don't know someone's story. A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd, but Barron wasn't finished. He turned slightly, addressing not just the journalist but the entire room. "We live in a time where it's easy to tear each other down," he said, his voice steady but filled with quiet conviction. "Words have power. They can hurt or they can heal. They can divide or they can unite. And I think we could all use a little more of the latter." The audience was spellbound. Barron's words, spoken with calm resolve, carried a weight that seemed to transcend his age. It was clear that he wasn't just responding to a moment. He was speaking to something much larger, something universal. Taking a step back, Barron once again locked eyes with the journalist. "I hope this gives you something to think about," he said softly. There was no malice in his voice, only a quiet strength that left the room in awe. He turned and walked back to his seat, the soft clicks of his shoes on the polished floor the only sound in the stunned silence. No one moved, no one spoke. Even the journalists stood frozen, their earlier bravado completely dissolved. But as Barron sat down, the applause began to build. At first it was a hesitant clap from somewhere near the front of the room, but it grew quickly, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Within moments, the entire ballroom was on its feet, erupting into a thunderous standing ovation. Some clapped with admiration, others with a sense of redemption for the awkwardness that had hung in the air just minutes earlier. The journalist, still standing at the podium, attempted to muster a smile, but it was clear the moment no longer belonged to them. Barron, seated back at his table, didn't react to the applause. He remained composed, offering only a polite nod to the attendees around him. It wasn't humility or shyness. It was the quiet assurance of someone who had said exactly what needed to be said. Within hours, snippets of the moment began flooding social media. Attendees had discreetly recorded Barron's speech on their phones, and the footage was now spreading like wildfire. Tweets, Instagram stories, and TikTok clips captured the essence of the evening, with captions ranging from admiration for Barron's composure to critiques of the journalist's misplaced humor. "Barron Trump just schooled an entire room on class and respect," read one viral tweet. Another post featured a video clip of his speech with the caption, "This is how you respond with grace. Take notes." A popular news outlet published an op-ed the next morning calling Barron's response a masterclass in dignity under pressure. As the media frenzy escalated, some speculated whether Barron would issue a follow-up statement or grant interviews, but he remained silent, uninterested in fueling the spectacle. To him, the moment had passed. He had said what he needed to say, and that was enough. Meanwhile, conversations sparked across the country. Debates about respect, media responsibility, and the power of words flooded television panels and online discussions. Many were reminded that even those in the public eye, especially those born into it, were still human. Back at the Fairmont Grand Hotel, long after the applause had faded and the last guests had trickled out, the journalist remained behind, staring at the now empty ballroom. They had come expecting to command the room, to dictate the narrative. Instead, they had witnessed something rare, a young man who had every reason to retaliate, but chose grace instead. And as they replayed the moment in their mind, one thought lingered. They hadn't just delivered a speech that night. They had been taught a lesson. Another post, shared by a prominent celebrity in attendance, stated, "No matter what you think of his family, this young man just gave us all something to think about." News outlets picked up the story the next morning. Some praised Barron for his maturity, calling it a defining moment for someone who had spent much of his life under the weight of public scrutiny. Others debated the ethics of the journalist's remarks, questioning whether public figures, especially young ones, should ever be fair game for such commentary. The journalists, for their part, issued a statement the following day. Comedy and commentary are powerful tools, but they must be wielded responsibly. Last night, I crossed a line, and I apologized to Barron Trump for my remarks. But not everyone accepted the apology at face value. Talk shows, podcasts, and online forums buzzed with heated debates about the incident. Some argued that Barron's speech was a much-needed call for civility in an increasingly polarized world. Others saw it as a poignant reminder that even those in the public eye are human beings, deserving of respect. For Barron, however, the frenzy of attention seemed irrelevant. He returned to his daily life with the same quiet dignity that had defined his response at the gala. Those who knew him said he barely acknowledged the uproar, choosing instead to focus on his studies and personal interests. But while Barron moved on, the lessons from that night lingered, sparking conversations that reached far beyond the ballroom. As the dust settled from the night of the gala, its ripple effects continued to echo far and wide. News outlets eventually moved on to other stories, but the moment lived on in discussions at dinner tables, classrooms, and offices. People dissected the evening, not just for its drama, but for the powerful lessons it left behind. Barron's calm and thoughtful response had struck a chord. In an age dominated by outrage and instant reactions, his choice to approach the situation with poise and perspective was a refreshing anomaly. Many drew parallels to their own lives, asking themselves, how often do we pause before reacting? How often do we choose words that build instead of words that destroy? For some, the incident was a wake-up call. It highlighted how easy it is to dehumanize others in the name of humor, politics, or entertainment. The journalist's comments were a stark reminder of the power words hold, not just to entertain but to wound. Parents used the moment as a teaching opportunity for their children. Videos of Barron's speech became a tool in classrooms to discuss respect, empathy, and the importance of standing up for oneself without tearing others down. Teachers praised his ability to address conflict with grace, encouraging students to think critically about how they communicate. Yet the most profound impact of the night was its ability to bridge divides. If only for a moment, people from different political beliefs and walks of life found themselves united in admiration for Barron's maturity. It wasn't about his last name or his father's legacy. It was about a young man demonstrating that respect and empathy still have a place in the world, even in the face of provocation. By choosing to respond with kindness and integrity, Barron had reminded everyone in that room, and countless others watching from afar, that dignity is a choice. His actions showed that no matter how heated or polarized a situation may become, there is always power in choosing to rise above. As the conversations continued, one sentiment seemed to resonate most. Words can wound, but they can also heal. It's up to each of us to decide how we use them. Barron Trump's response at the gala serves as a powerful reminder that dignity and composure speak louder than insults. In today's world, where social media and public discourse often reward outrage, his calm reaction teaches us an important lesson. We don't have to meet negativity with more negativity. Instead, we can choose to respond with grace, wisdom, and respect. Before reacting to criticism or provocation, take a deep breath, assess the situation, and respond in a way that uplifts rather than divides. Kindness and self-control are strengths, not weaknesses. In any conflict, remember, words can wound, but they can also heal. Choose wisely.